Okay, hi, this is part 6, and this is the second part of what I felt the Lord had given me, and we're going to pick up in 1 Kings chapter 12. We're not going to read it all for time's sake, but I encourage you to read 1 Kings 12 and 13. We see chapter 11 ends with Solomon dying, and his son, Rehoboam, is now reigning in his stead. And the whole chapter talks about Rehoboam and about how another person comes on the scene called Jeroboam. And Jeroboam, if you look in chapter 11, starting in verse 26, it explains a little bit about who Jeroboam is. And this is the person I want to kind of focus on in this story. And it says in chapter 11, starting in verse 26, Jeroboam, son of Nebat, an Ephraite of Zereda, Solomon's servant. So he was Solomon's servant, whose mother's name was Zurah, a widow woman, rebelled against the king. Okay, so Jeroboam was a servant of Solomon, and he rebelled against the king. Verse 27, and for this reason Solomon built the Milo and repaired the breaches of the city of David his father. And the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of courage. Solomon, seeing that the young man was industrious, put him in charge over all the forced labor of the house of Joseph. At that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite met him on the way. Ahijah had clad himself with a new garment, and they were alone in the field. Ahijah caught the new garment he wore, tore it into 12 pieces. He said to Jeroboam, you take 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord God of Israel, behold, I will tear the kingdom from the hand of Solomon, and will give you 10 tribes. But he shall have 1 tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, the city which I have chosen of all the tribes of Israel. Because they have forsaken me, and have worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Shamosh, the god of the Moabites, and Melcom, the god of the Ammonites, and have not walked in my ways to do what is right in my sight, keeping my statutes and my ordinances as David his father. However, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him ruler all the days of his life for David my servant's sake, whom I chose because he kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand and give it to you, 10 tribes. Yet to his son will I give 1 tribe, that David my servant may always have a light before me in Jerusalem, the city where I have chosen to put my name. And I will take you, and you shall reign according to all that you desire, all that your soul desires, and you shall be king over Israel. So here he's telling Jeroboam, he's prophesying to him that he is going to rule and be king over Israel. Okay, and then verse 38 says, and if you will hearken to all I command you, and you will walk in my ways and do right in my sight, keeping my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, I will be with you and build you a sure house, as I built for David, and will give Israel to you. And I will for this afflict the descendants of David, but not forever. Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt. And then we have, the story takes place in 12, in chapter 12, Rehoboam is king. And again, read that yourself, the whole chapter. And it says in verses, if we go down to verse 18, then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the tribute, taskmaster over the forced labor, and all Israel stoned him to death with stones. So King Rehoboam hastened to get into his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has rebelled against the house of David to this day. When all Israel heard that Jeroboam had returned, they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel. None followed the house of David except the tribe of Judah. Okay, so here we have Jeroboam is now king over Israel. Okay, and then down to verse 26, it says he was concerned that the people would go back to return to the house of David. So he was concerned that they would go back and be with the king of Rehoboam. So what he did was he took 2 calves of gold, and he told the people, he said, it's way too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods. And here is the gods that brought you out of Egypt. Worship them, in verse 28 and 29. And in 29 it says, he set the one golden calf in Bethel and the other put in Dan. And this thing became a sin for the people, went to worship each of them as far as Dan. And Jeroboam also did things his own way. He did not do them according to what God had instructed him. In verse 32 it says, and Jeroboam appointed a feast on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the feast kept in Judah. And he offered sacrifices upon the altar. So he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves he had made, and he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places he had made. So he offered upon the altar that he had made in Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month, a date which he chose individually, and he appointed a feast for the Israelites, and he went up to the altar to burn incense in defiance against God's law. Okay, so with that in mind, now we're going to quickly just read a little bit of chapter 13. We're not going to read all of it, but this is the story of a prophet comes on the scene, a man of God, it says in verse 1, out of Judah by the word of the Lord to Bethel, and Jeroboam stood by the altar to burn incense. And this man of God comes and he cries against the altar, and he starts to prophesy that there will be a son born to the house of David, Josiah by name, okay? And he gave a sign saying the altar would be broken, split in ashes. And so in verse 4 it says, when King Jeroboam heard the words of the man of God, he cried out at the altar in Bethel. He thrust out his hand, saying, lay hold on him. And his hand which he put forth against him dried up, so he could not draw it to him again. And then in verse 5 it says the altar was split in two. And then in verse 6, Jeroboam pleads with the man of God, and he says, entreat now the favor of the Lord your God. Pray for me that my hand may be restored to me. And the man of God entreat it. Then in verse 7 it says, the king said to the man, would you come home with me and be refreshed, come and eat, and I will give you a reward. But the man of God said to the king Jeroboam, if you give me half your house, I will not go with you, and I will not eat bread nor drink water in this place, for I was commanded by the word of the Lord, you shall eat no bread nor drink water, return by where you came. Okay, so as you continue to read in that chapter 12, you will see that another prophet got wind of this, that there was a man of God who had prophesied against the altar of Jeroboam, and sent his sons out to go get him. And anyway, the other prophet comes to the man of God in verse 18. He says to him, I am a prophet also, as you are. And an angel spoke to me by the word of the Lord, saying, bring him back with you to your house, that he may eat bread and drink water. But he lied to him. So the prophet, the man of God that prophesied to Jeroboam, goes with him, and they sat at the table, and they ate, and the word of the Lord came to the other prophet and said, he cried to him and said, because you have disobeyed the word of the Lord, and have not kept the commandment which the Lord your God commanded you, but you have come back and have eaten bread and drunk water in the place for which the Lord said, you eat no bread, no drink no water, that's verse 22, your corpse shall not come to the tomb of your fathers. And after the prophet of the house had eaten bread and drunk, he saddled the donkey for the man he had brought back. And when he had gone, a lion met him by the road and slew him, and his corpse was cast in the way, and the donkey stood by it. The lion also stood by the corpse. And as we know in 1 Peter 5:8, it says that the devil roams around whom he may devour, right? Let's just quickly go to that. 5:8. 4:8, sorry, did I say? 2 Peter 5:8. And we're going to have to go on to the next segment. I'll see you in segment 7.